what do you remember of that whole experience? Because had you tried to get published before?
No. I always wanted to write just for the sake of it. And when I was younger, I had this romantic idea that after I was dead, people would find a suitcase of manuscripts and say, hey, this guy was really good. But I was living very close to the breadline, and I had my finances worked out really tightly so that I did just enough work as a nurse to cover my rent and food. And I just couldn't see the point of paying a typist $120 or whatever it would have cost to type up a manuscript, because I didn't own a typewriter, and I lived in Australia at the time, in order to send it off to publishers with no guarantee of you know, it being published. It just seemed like an enormous expense. Even putting stamps on an envelope that you possibly wouldn't get back again. It just, I mean, for that money I could have bought a second-hand record. It just didn't, it didn't make any financial sense to me, because I had my little lifestyle sorted out.
This was one of the things that was very unusual about Michel, because most people who write to be read, and because they want to be read and they want to be therefore published, because you need to be published to be read in any kind of volume, quantity, number. And so when we started this conversation, and I realized Michel had been writing for, you know, 20 years, kind of the Crimson Petal and the White, you started in Australia back in the early 80s. Sugar was known as Phoenix at that stage. And so there was a very long gestation period, particularly for that novel, but actually for all of Michel's writing. And that was one of the things which I didn't realize when I was first reading it, made it so exceptional. This wasn't something, this was an author and a writer who'd been honing and working on his craft for many, many years, and without any kind of, very little self-conscious kind of thinking about, or what will people make of this or anything like that. He wasn't worried about that, or perhaps distracted by that in the way that I think can sometimes be unhelpful for a writer.
Well, I remember that Eva, my wife, and I had many conversations in which she kept insisting that literature only exists when people read it. And I kept saying, no, it has an inherent sort of abstract value, and it's assessed by the god of literature, who sort of who looks down and says, yes, that one's all right, this one needs work, and so on. But it all takes place in a sort of artistic vacuum. And Eva was saying, look, that's rubbish. You've just got to let people read your work. And in the end, she was saying, look, just give it to me. I'll put it in an envelope. I'll put the stamp on it. You don't have to worry, blah, blah, blah. So she was very instrumental in getting me to as far as a publisher. And I mean, as you know, in the modern world, the usual career trajectory is that you've got this hot young guy or gal who is determined to be a successful writer, and they need to get themselves an agent so that the agent can persuade a publisher to look at the work. And then they put out books, you know, in quick succession while they're learning how to write. Whereas the main function of an agent for me was never needed, because this publisher just rang up at 7:30 in the morning and said, I've just read your stories, which someone else told you to send to me, and I love them, and can I publish your book? And that is one of the reasons why the relationship got off on, you know, to a good start. And I think another thing that often happens with writers, because they're ambitious, financially ambitious in terms of what they feel that the work ought to achieve for them career-wise, as soon as there's any success of a sort of under-the-skin scale, that's when other publishers, larger publishers, move in and say, look, this crowd in Edinburgh, you know, they did okay with it, but, you know, they're small fish, and we could do this and we could do that. And that's when these people move over to a conglomerate. And, you know, this great relationship is felt to be a kind of stepping stone. And I was determined not to do that, and that as long as Canongate was still passionate about the books, that I would stay with Canongate, and I did.